The chain snapped at the worst possible moment. Nadia Porter was 11 years old, already late for school, already in trouble with Mrs. Calloway for the third time that week, and now her bike was lying on the sidewalk like something that had given up on life. The back wheel had locked. The chain had jumped clean off the gear. She stood over it, backpack half on, hair still not brushed, and felt the specific kind of fury that only comes when a bad morning decides it wants to get worse. She kicked the tire. It did not help. She sat on the curb in front of 412 Delmer Street and stared at her useless bike and thought about crying. She was almost there, almost at the part where her lip would tremble and she would feel sorry for herself for a good solid minute. But then the garage door across the street made a sound. Not the sound of a door being unlocked, not the sound of a latch or a handle, just a slow, heavy groan like the door itself was waking up reluctantly, the way old things do when morning comes too fast. The garage at 414 Delmer did not look like much. It had never looked like much. The sign above it was hand-painted in faded black letters on a piece of wood that had been white once, maybe 20 years ago. The concrete in front of it was so stained with oil and grease that it looked like the ground itself had a history. There was a single yellow bulb hanging inside, and it flickered on now, throwing thin light across the doorway. And then Walter Gaines stepped out. He was 74 years old, tall even now, though the years had put a slight curve in his back that had not always been there. His hands were the first thing most people noticed. Large, dark, careful hands. The kind of hands that looked like they had fixed more things than they had broken, which was not true of most people's hands. He wore the same thing he wore every morning. Dark work pants, a gray shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbow, and boots that had been resoled so many times the soles were almost a different pair of boots entirely. He stopped when he saw the girl on the curb. She looked at him, he looked at her, then he looked at the bike. He did not say anything right away. That was the thing about Walter. He did not fill silence the way most people did, stuffing it with words so nobody had to sit with it. He just stood there for a moment, reading the situation the way a person reads a broken engine, looking for where the trouble started. Then he walked across the street. He crouched beside the bike with the ease of a man who has crouched beside broken things his entire life. He turned the pedal, looked at the chain, pressed 2 fingers against the rear derailleur and moved it slightly, checking the tension. He made a small sound in the back of his throat, not a good sound or a bad sound, just a thinking sound. "You go to Calloway's class," he said. Nadia blinked. "How did you know that?" "Because you live on this street, you're 11, it's a Tuesday, and you've got that look on your face that kids get when they're late to a class that scares them." He stood up slowly. "Bring it inside." She did not move right away. Her mother had told her the usual things that mothers tell children about talking to strangers, but there was something about the way he said it, not like an invitation that could be refused, like a simple instruction given by someone who already knew how the next 10 minutes were going to go. She picked up the bike and wheeled it across the street. The inside of the garage smelled like oil and metal, and something faintly sweet she could not identify. There were tools on every wall, hung on hooks and racked on shelves, arranged in a way that looked chaotic until you looked longer and realized everything was exactly where it was supposed to be. There was a workbench along the back wall covered in parts, a radio on the shelf above it, switched off, a stool with a cushion so flat it was basically just a stool. Walter took the bike without asking for it. He flipped it upside down onto a stand and reached for a tool in less than 2 seconds, the way people reach for things that are always exactly where they left them. "What's your name?" he said. "Nadia." "Nadia." He repeated it like he was making a note of it. "You know what's wrong with this bike, Nadia?" The chain fell off. The chain fell off because the rear derailleur is bent. The chain fell off because of what happened before the chain fell off. He glanced at her over his shoulder. Most problems are like that. The thing you can see is never the first thing that went wrong. She watched his hands move. They were fast, even though he was not rushing. There was no wasted motion in anything he did. He adjusted the derailleur with a small tool, reset the chain, turned the pedal to check the movement, adjusted again. His face was calm and focused, not the concentrated face of someone working hard, the easy face of someone doing something they know completely. In 8 minutes, the bike was fixed. He flipped it right side up and checked the brakes, pressed them twice, checked them again. He did not just check them once and move on, he checked them twice. She noticed that. Brakes are more important than anything else on a bike, he said. People always want to talk about speed. Speed gets you there. Brakes get you home. He wheeled the bike to the door and held it out for her. She took it, and she stood there for a second because she was not sure what came next. She knew what came next in normal situations. In normal situations, you paid. "How much?" she said. He shook his head once. "I don't have a lot of money, but I have $3, she said. "Keep your $3. "But you fixed it." "I know I fixed it." She stood there another second. "Why?" He looked at her. Not the way adults look at children when they're deciding whether to give a real answer or a polite non-answer. He actually looked at her straight, for a moment that lasted long enough to mean something. "Because it needed fixing," he said, and then he turned and walked back into the garage. Nadia stood on the sidewalk with her fixed bike and her $3, and the strange feeling that something had just happened to her that she did not have words for yet. She was still going to be late. Mrs. Calloway was still going to give her that look. None of that had changed. But she rode to school that morning with her brakes working perfectly, and she held them twice at every stop, the way he'd checked them twice, and she could not explain why she did that except that it felt like the right thing to do. She did not know, at 11 years old, sitting in Mrs. Calloway's classroom with her late slip face down on the desk, that the man across the street had been doing this for 16 years. She did not know that there were 47 children in a 4-block radius whose bikes Walter Gaines had fixed, most of them without ever being asked, some of them without ever being seen. She did not know about the bikes he left propped against fences in the morning, fixed overnight, left without a note or a name or any indication of who had done it. She did not know about the photograph inside the old red toolbox on the left side of the workbench, the one that was never opened in front of anyone. The boy in the photograph was 12, grinning the wide, unguarded grin of a kid who does not yet know that photographs remember things long after the day forgets them. He was sitting on a bike, a blue one. She did not know any of that yet. But she came back the next morning, not with a broken bike, just came back, stood at the edge of the garage and watched. Walter did not tell her to leave. He did not tell her to come in either. He just worked and she just watched, and somewhere in that silence something began, the way most important things begin, without anyone deciding to start them. She told her brother about it that evening. His name was Owen. He was 9, shorter than her by a head, and intensely skeptical of anything he had not personally investigated. He had opinions about everything. He would have had opinions about the order of the planets if someone gave him a platform to deliver them. "He just fixed it," Owen said. "In like 8 minutes. For free." "Yes." "Why?" He said because it needed fixing. Owen turned this over in his mind. That's either the most normal thing anyone's ever said or the weirdest. I can't tell which. "Me neither," said Nadia. "I want to meet him." "You'll have to just stand there and watch. You can't talk too much. He doesn't like a lot of talking." "How do you know?" "I just know." Owen went the next morning. He stood 2 feet to the left of Nadia and watched Walter work on a bike belonging to a woman from the next block who had brought it in with a rattling noise she could not locate. Walter located it in 40 seconds, a loose bolt on the fender bracket. He tightened it, rode the bike 3 feet forward and 3 feet back, tightened it again and handed it back. The woman tried to give him money. He shook his head. She pushed it. He shook his head again, and there was something in the second shake of his head that settled the matter so completely that she said thank you and left. Owen was quiet for a minute and a half. That was a long time for Owen. "He's good," Owen said finally. Not to Nadia, not really to Walter, just to the air, like he was updating a file somewhere. Walter glanced at him. "You going to stand there all morning?" "Yes," said Owen without any apology. Walter almost smiled. It was quick. It was very nearly invisible, but it was there. "Then make yourself useful. Hand me the 3/8 wrench. It's on the second hook from the left." Owen found it in 4 seconds. He handed it over without dropping it or fumbling with it or doing any of the things a 9-year-old might do. He just handed it over correctly, handle first. Walter looked at him for a brief moment. "You'll do," he said. And that was that. By the end of the week, there were 3 children in the garage every morning before school. Nadia, Owen, and their neighbor Priya, who was 10, quiet and had eyes that missed absolutely nothing. She never touched the tools. She just watched, and occasionally she asked questions so precisely worded that Walter would stop what he was doing and actually think before he answered. The neighborhood kept waking up around them. Cars drove past. Dogs were walked. Garbage trucks made their rounds. And in the crumbling garage at 414 Delmer Street, a 74-year-old man who had spent 16 years fixing things in silence found that silence slowly filling with the sounds of 3 children learning, without knowing they were learning, the particular language of a man who had never found another way to say what he needed to say. None of them knew what that language was about. Not yet. But the red toolbox sat on the left side of the workbench, and inside it was a photograph of a boy on a blue bike, and Walter checked the brakes on every single bicycle twice before he handed it back, every time, without exception, and the reason lived inside that box where nobody could see it. The morning continued. The wrench turned, the chain held, the brakes worked. And Walter Gaines went on fixing things, the only way he knew how to carry what he carried. Outside the garage, the world was doing what it always does, moving, forgetting, not paying attention. Inside, something was being built that none of them had a name for yet. That was all right. It did not need a name yet. It just needed time. The 3 children had a system by the second week, though none of them had agreed to it out loud. Nadia arrived first always, at 7 minutes past 6 in the morning. She arrived this early not because Walter had told her to, and not because she was particularly eager in the way that eager children are eager, performing enthusiasm for adults who will reward it. She arrived because she had discovered, by accident, that the first 7 minutes after Walter opened the garage were different from the rest of the morning. In those 7 minutes, before Owen arrived with his opinions, and before Priya arrived with her questions, Walter would sometimes talk. Not a lot, never a story with a beginning and an end neatly wrapped, more like pieces. Fragments of a larger thing she could not see the shape of yet. He would say something while adjusting a brake cable, looking at his hands, not at her, and she would listen very carefully and store it away. He said once in that quiet window, "The first bike I ever fixed belonged to a kid on my block in Baltimore. I was about your age. I had no idea what I was doing. Took me 3 hours. Kid rode it exactly 4 feet and the chain fell off again." He paused. "I went home and learned how to do it properly. Took me another week. Then I fixed it again. Kid never knew it was me the first time." Nadia waited to see if there was more. There was not. Walter moved to the next task. The story was over because that was where he chose to end it, not because he had run out of things to say. She understood without being told that this was simply how he communicated. Not in paragraphs, in small deliveries spaced far apart that only made sense if you kept all of them. She started keeping a notebook. She did not tell Owen about the notebook. Owen would have had things to say about it. By the third week, the children knew the layout of the garage the way they knew their own bedrooms. The wrenches on the north wall, arranged by size. The cables in the third drawer on the right, coiled neatly. The tire levers hanging on a hook next to the door, 3 of them, always 3, because Walter said losing a tire lever was the kind of small stupidity that turns a 10-minute job into an hour. Owen had developed a specific talent for finding any tool Walter named in under 5 seconds. He treated this as a competitive sport he was playing against himself, and improved his average daily. Walter never acknowledged the improvement out loud, but on the morning Owen hit 4 seconds flat on the half-inch socket wrench, Walter said, without looking up, "Decent." Owen stood there for a moment with the expression of a person who has just received the highest possible honor. Priya had started asking questions that were increasingly not about bikes. "If a thing is broken for a long time," she asked one morning, watching Walter straighten a bent rim with careful, even pressure, "does it get harder to fix the longer it waits?" Walter considered this. "Depends on what's broken. Metal, yes. Rust sets in, the brake gets brittle. If you leave it long enough, you stop fixing it and start replacing it." He turned the wheel slowly, checking the straightness against a mark only he could see. "Other things, no. Some things that wait a long time are actually easier to fix, because they've had time to settle, time to show you exactly where the damage is." Priya nodded slowly, in the way she nodded when she was filing something away for later. Walter went back to the wheel. He did not ask what she was really asking about. He understood that the question was not about metal. This was the other thing about him. He did not push. He did not pry. He did not pursue the conversation past the point where it was offered. Children, he seemed to understand, will tell you what they need to tell you if you do not make the telling feel dangerous. The neighborhood was slowly becoming aware of him, not of Walter himself specifically, but of the phenomenon. Mrs. Eugene from 3 blocks over told her neighbor that someone had fixed her daughter's bike overnight and left it on the porch. The neighbor told someone else. The information passed the way neighborhood information passes, quietly and imprecisely, picking up distortions along the way. Some people thought it was a teenager doing it as part of a school service project. One man was convinced it was some sort of marketing campaign, and waited around for someone to try to sell him something. A woman named Carol, who lived alone in the blue house on the corner and paid close attention to her street, thought she knew who it was. She had seen the light on in the garage on Delmer at odd hours. She had noticed the fixed bikes. She had done the arithmetic. She brought her own bike to Walter one Saturday morning. It had a wobble in the front wheel she had been living with for 3 years. Walter fixed it in 12 minutes. She tried to pay him. He declined. "I know it's you," she said. "The bike's on the porches." He looked at her steadily, said nothing. "Why?" she said. He picked up the next tool. "I mean it," Carol said. She was not the kind of woman who was deterred by silence. She had raised 3 children and negotiated a better price on her own roof repair, and once stood in front of a city council meeting for 40 minutes making a point about a broken streetlight. Silence did not unsettle her. "You've been doing it for how long?" "Carol," Walter said. He had only just learned her name from the work order she'd written on the scrap of paper she handed him. He used it anyway. "Your wheel is fixed. Your brakes are good. You'll want to check the tire pressure every 2 weeks. She looked at him for a moment. Then she said, "You're a stubborn man." "So I've been told." She almost laughed. "Are you going to let me say thank you at least?" He paused. "That one I'll take." She said thank you and left, but she came back the following Saturday. Not with a broken bike, with a piece of pie wrapped in foil, because she had decided that if he would not take money, she would find something he could not logically refuse. He ate the pie. He did not say it was good, but he ate all of it, and when she brought another piece the following Saturday he ate that one too. This was, in the language of Walter Gaines, A warm reception. Nadia witnessed the pie transaction from the stool in the corner where she had started doing her homework in the mornings before school. She made a note of it, not in the notebook, just in the part of her mind where she was building a picture of this man, one small piece at a time. Owen, who had been organizing the cable drawer for the 15th time because he had a theory about a better system, looked up when Carol left and said, "She likes him." "She respects him," Priya corrected from her perch on the windowsill. "Same thing," Owen said. "It's not." They looked at each other. Then they looked at Walter. He was already at the next bike, already working, already somewhere inside the focused quiet of a man who had made his peace with what his days looked like. In the red toolbox on the left side of the workbench, undisturbed, the photograph sat in the dark. Nadia had seen it once, 3 weeks ago. She had not been looking for it. Walter had opened the toolbox to get something from the bottom, and in the brief moment before he lifted the tray, she had seen the photograph pressed against the inside of the lid. A boy on a blue bike, grinning. She had looked away before Walter saw her looking. She had not said anything. She had not asked. But she had thought about it every day since. About the way Walter checked brakes twice. About the way he had said, that first morning, that brakes were more important than anything else on a bike because speed gets you there, but brakes get you home. About the way the photograph was hidden inside the box, that was never opened in front of anyone. She was 11 years old, and she did not have all the pieces yet. But she was the kind of 11-year-old who understood that some things reveal themselves gradually, on their own schedule, and that the worst thing you can do is rush them. So she waited. The mornings continued. Owen shaved his tool retrieval time down to 3.5 seconds and considered this a personal record worth defending. Priya asked Walter a question about the physics of tire pressure, and he answered it so completely and technically that she looked startled, because most adults did not answer questions like that. Walter had, at some point in the 30 years between his factory job and this garage, read a significant amount. He did not talk about this. But occasionally, a question would land at the right angle, and he would answer it in a way that opened a door into a much larger room than anyone had expected. More bikes came in. A woman from the apartment building 2 streets over brought a child's bike with a bent fork. A teenage boy came in looking defensive, certain he was going to be told the bike wasn't fixable, already preparing to be disappointed. Walter fixed it. The boy left looking like he had expected one thing and received something different. Word kept spreading, the slow, warm way that true things spread when no one is trying to make them spread fast. Nobody put it online, not yet. Nobody had thought to. It was still at this point a neighborhood thing, a street thing. A thing that belonged to the particular geography of 4 blocks, to the people who lived there, and the children who rode there, and the woman who brought pie on Saturdays and an old man who worked with careful hands, and said very little and somehow, without trying, made the people around him feel like things could be fixed. It was still small. But small things, Priya would have told you, were just large things that had not been noticed yet. She said that one morning, looking at the garage with that particular measuring look she had. Owen said that was the most complicated way anyone had ever stated the obvious. Nadia wrote it in the notebook. Walter, who had heard all of it, said nothing. He turned the pedal, he checked the chain, he checked the brakes. The morning the photograph was seen again started like every other morning. The light came on in the garage at 414 Delmer Street at 6 o'clock exactly. Walter tied his boots in the same order he always tied them, left then right. A habit so old it was no longer a habit, but simply the order of the universe as far as his hands were concerned. He drank 1 cup of coffee, black, standing at the kitchen window that looked out at the street, watching the neighborhood arrange itself for the day. Then he crossed to the garage and opened it. Nadia arrived at 7 minutes past, same as always. She dropped her backpack in its spot beside the stool and sat, and for a moment neither of them said anything because that was how mornings began, and neither of them saw any reason to change it. Walter was working on a bicycle that had come in the evening before. It belonged to a woman named Grace, who lived on the parallel street and worked 2 jobs and had no time to take it anywhere, and had heard, through the slow telephone of the neighborhood, that the man on Delmer would look at it. It had a cracked frame. Walter was not sure it could be fully repaired, but he was looking at it carefully before he decided that. "Can you fix it?" Nadia asked. "Probably not the frame, but I can make it safe to ride, which is different from fixed but better than broken." "Is that always an option? Make it safe even if you can't fully fix it?" Walter looked at the frame. "Not always. Sometimes the damage is in a place that can't be made safe without being made whole. But this one, yes." He ran his thumb along the crack. "The crack is in the top tube, far from the joints. If I brace it right, it will hold." Nadia watched his hands. "How do you know how to do all of this?" "My father," he said, and then he said nothing else. She waited. When nothing more came, she wrote the 2 words in her notebook. "My father." She would think about what they meant later. Owen arrived 22 minutes past 6, which was late for him. He arrived looking bothered in the specifically contained way that Owen looked bothered when something had been decided without his input. "Mrs. Calloway moved the history test to Friday," he announced. "That's better, isn't it?" Nadia said. "It should be, but she did it without asking anyone." "Which is technically her right, but still." Priya arrived at 6:30 and immediately noticed the cracked frame. She stood beside it and traced the crack with her eyes without touching it, the way she examined everything, at a careful distance first. "That crack has been there for a while," she said. "About a year from the rust pattern," Walter said. So she wrote it for a year with a cracked frame. "A lot of people ride things that are damaged and don't know it, and some people know it and don't have another option." Priya nodded. She was doing the thing she did when a conversation about one thing was actually about many things at once. The morning moved forward. Walter worked on Grace's bicycle, and the children moved around the garage doing the things they had come to do. Owen reorganized the spoke wrench collection, which had been perfectly organized but not organized in the way he thought best. Priya read from a bicycle mechanic's manual she had found on Walter's shelf and asked him questions from it periodically. Nadia did homework and watched. It was a morning like many others. Until Nadia needed the bottom tray tool. She had been reaching for a specific small screwdriver that Walter had asked for, and he had said the bottom tray of the red box, and she had gone to the red box without thinking about it being the red box, because she was thinking about the task, and she had opened it, and she had lifted the tray. The photograph was right there. Not pressed flat this time, propped slightly against the side like it had shifted since she last saw it. She saw it fully this time. The boy, the blue bike, the grin, and written on the back, in handwriting she had not seen before because she had only ever seen Walter's handwriting on work orders, in smaller and younger letters, a name. Marcus Summer, July. She found the screwdriver. She closed the tray. She closed the box. She walked back to Walter and handed him the screwdriver, and she sat back down on the stool and she did not say anything. But she held very still. Walter took the screwdriver, used it, set it down. He glanced at her once, just briefly, the way he sometimes checked the alignment of a wheel, not looking for a problem, just checking. He saw something in her face. He was very good at reading small signals in things. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, without any preamble, without any lead-up, in the calm, flat voice he used for things that mattered too much for ceremony. His name was Marcus. Nadia did not move. Owen went still at the spoke wrench shelf. Priya lowered the manual. Walter kept his eyes on the bicycle. "He was my son. He died 16 years ago. He was 12 years old." A pause, one beat. Bike accident, brake failure. The garage was so quiet that the distant sound of a car on the next street was perfectly audible. "I'm sorry," Nadia said. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Walter nodded once, acceptance of the condolence, nothing performative, nothing that required her to say more. "That's why I checked the brakes twice," she said. He looked at her then, not surprised exactly. More like confirmed, like he had suspected she was the kind of person who put things together and was now certain of it. "Yes," he said. He picked up the next tool. Owen, who had the emotional intelligence of someone much older than 9, but expressed it in the way of someone very much 9, said quietly, "I always wondered about the brakes thing." Walter said, "Now you know." Priya said nothing. She had gone back to the manual, but her eyes were not moving across the page. The morning continued. Walter finished bracing Grace's frame. He tested it again. He would tell Grace that it was stable but not permanent, and he would tell her to bring it back in 6 months, and she would not have to pay for either visit. At 5 minutes to 8, the children picked up their bags. This was the daily rhythm. They knew it without a clock. At the door, Nadia stopped. She turned back. "Can I ask something?" Walter looked up. Did fixing bikes help with what happened? He considered the question seriously, the way he considered all serious questions. He did not rush to answer it. "No," he said, "it doesn't fix that, nothing fixes that." She waited. "But it means something was done," he said. "Every bike that goes out of here with good brakes, that means something was done." He looked at his hands. "That's the closest I've got." She nodded. She believed him. She also understood that for some people that closest is enough, not because it fills the space, but because it gives the space something to do. She left. Owen followed, already recalibrating the morning's information in his relentlessly practical brain. Priya walked out last and paused at the doorway for just a moment. "Thank you for telling us," she said, not to fill the silence because it needed saying. Walter said nothing, but he did not dismiss it either. He let it stand. Outside, the 3 children walked to school. They did not talk about what had happened right away. They walked in a quiet that was different from their usual quiet because it was full rather than empty, the silence of people who have just been given something heavy and are being careful with it. Owen broke it eventually. "His brakes failed," he said. "Yes," said Nadia. "And he fixes brakes." "Yes." Owen thought about this for most of the block. "I think that might be one of the saddest and most decent things I've ever heard of," he said finally. "And I don't mean that in a bad way." Priya said, "There's no bad way to mean that." They kept walking. Back at the garage, Walter went back to work. He did not think about whether he had said too much or too little. He had said exactly what he said, and it had gone where it went, and that was all right. He picked up a new bike from the row, checked the chain, checked the gears, reached the brakes. Checked them twice. The photograph that changed everything was taken by a 12-year-old girl named Sophie, who had no particular intention of changing anything. Sophie Archer lived 3 streets from Walter's garage and attended the same school as Nadia and Owen, though she was in a different grade and ran in a different orbit entirely. She had a phone that was too nice for her age, according to her mother, and a photographer's eye that was entirely her own. She took pictures of things other people walked past: cracks in pavement, old signs, specific quality of afternoon light against brick. She had walked past 414 Delmer Street maybe 100 times. On a Thursday in October, she walked past it and stopped. The morning light was doing something particular to the garage front. The old sign, the oil-dark concrete, the row of bicycles leaning against the wall, each one fixed, each one waiting for someone who needed it. Walter was inside, visible through the open door, just visible the back of him and his hands, the yellow light, the movement. Sophie took the photograph without really deciding to. It was more like the photograph decided, and her phone was there. It was a good photograph, the kind that makes people stop scrolling. She posted it that afternoon with a small caption. She wrote it casually, the way you write things when you're not expecting them to go anywhere. She said, "This man fixes bikes for free for every kid in the neighborhood. He's been doing it for years. He never charges anyone. Nobody knows his name. I've lived here my whole life and I only just found out." She tagged the neighborhood group. She did not tag any media accounts. She did not use any of the language that people use when they are trying to make something spread. She just posted it. By 9 o'clock that night it had been shared 40 times. By the next morning, 400. By Friday evening, it was somewhere north of 12,000, and people in states that were not this state were seeing the photograph of the old garage and the old man with the careful hands and the row of fixed bikes, and sharing it with their own captions, each person adding their own meaning to it. Some people cried. Some people said this was the kind of story the world needed right now. Some people said things about community and kindness and the state of humanity, the words people use when something touches them, and they are trying to explain why. Walter knew none of this. Walter did not have a phone with social media. He had a phone that made calls and sent texts, and he used it for neither of those things especially often. He did not have a computer in the garage. He had a radio he rarely turned on. The first signal that something had changed came on Saturday morning. A man Walter did not recognize was standing across the street, looking at the garage and taking pictures with his phone. This happened around 7:15. Walter watched from inside. The man took pictures from 3 different angles and then walked away. Walter filed this and continued working. The second signal came at 8:40. A woman knocked on the garage door frame. She was holding a press badge. She was from the local television station. She was pleasant and direct. She said she had seen a post about him online and would love to talk to him for just a few minutes. Walter said no. She said she understood and handed him a business card. He took it. She left. He set the card on the workbench and did not look at it again. Owen arrived at 9 because it was Saturday, and his schedule was different on Saturdays. He came with a box of his mother's homemade rolls, which had become a Saturday tradition that nobody had officially started, but everyone had agreed to without discussion. He stopped at the garage door because there was a small cluster of people on the sidewalk across the street. He looked at the cluster, he looked at Walter, he looked at Walter's face. "What happened?" he said. "Someone put a photograph on the internet." Owen processed this. "Which photograph?" "Of the garage." Owen turned back and looked at the people across the street with the very old eyes of a 9-year-old who has arrived at a conclusion. "How many people saw it?" "I don't know exactly," Walter said. "Apparently a great many." Owen came inside, set down the rolls and pulled out his mother's phone, which she had lent him to look up a bicycle trivia fact the previous week and had not yet reclaimed. He searched. He found the post. He looked at the number. His expression did not change dramatically. He set the phone down. "It's been shared 17,000 times, he said. Walter said nothing. "That's a lot of people," Owen said. "I know what 17,000 is." "Right." Owen sat on the stool and thought about this. "What are you going to do?" "Work," Walter said. He picked up the next bike. By the time Nadia arrived at 10, there were 2 news vans parked on the street. There were people she did not recognize taking photographs from outside the garage. There was a reporter talking into a camera, gesturing at the building. Nadia stood in the middle of the sidewalk and watched all of this for a moment. She thought about the man inside. She thought about the red toolbox. She thought about what he had said. "That's the closest I've got." She went inside. Walter was working as if none of it was happening. Same pace, same hands, same yellow light. "You know they're out there," she said. "I know. It's because of the photograph. Sophie Archer took it. He looked up. You know her. From school. She didn't mean any harm by it. Walter nodded slowly. I know that. She doesn't need to apologize for anything. Nadia watched him. Does it bother you, all these people? He was quiet for a moment. What bothers me, he said carefully, is the idea that what I do here becomes something people clap for. I don't do it for that. I know. What I do here is private. It belongs to the people who need it, not to strangers who feel good about sharing a picture. Nadia thought about this. But maybe some of those strangers have kids with broken bikes who didn't know they could bring them somewhere. Walter looked at her. Something shifted in his expression. Not much. But a little. You're 11, he said. Almost 12. He almost smiled. When did you get so precise? I learned from someone who checks brakes twice. Walter made a sound, not quite a laugh, but the same family of thing. He went back to work. Outside, the van stayed. Reporters knocked periodically. Walter declined each one with the same brevity. He was not rude about it. He was simply conclusive. His no contained no invitation for a follow-up. Priya arrived at noon and took in the scene outside with her measuring look. She came inside and sat in her spot. They're going to keep coming, she said. Probably, said Walter. What would make them stop? If I gave them something. Would you? He turned the pedal, checked the chain. I'll decide when I decide. Carol came at 2 o'clock with pie, same as every Saturday, and elbowed through the reporters on the sidewalk with the polished effectiveness of a woman who had stood at city council meetings for 40 minutes arguing about streetlights. She set the pie on the workbench. You're famous, she said. I'm not, Walter said. The internet disagrees. He cut a piece of pie, ate it standing up. The internet disagrees with a lot of things that are true. Carol looked at him. She had come to know this man over the months of Saturday pies. She knew what his no looked like. She knew what his yes looked like. She knew what his don't push this looked like. She saw something else today, not worry exactly, not exactly discomfort. More like a man standing very carefully at the edge of something he had not expected to be standing near. If it gets to be too much, she said, you don't have to answer the door. I know that. And if it gets to be not too much, she said, that's allowed too. Walter looked at her. All I mean, Carol said, is that whatever you decide, it's yours to decide. People finding out what you do doesn't mean you owe them anything else. He was quiet for a moment. You're a perceptive woman, Carol. I've been told, she said and went home. Walter stood at the workbench with half a piece of pie and a street full of cameras, and 3 children looking at him from various corners of the garage, and the weight of 16 years of private doing sitting squarely on his shoulders. He thought about Marcus. He thought about the photograph in the red box. He thought about the boy's grin, which had been the most unguarded thing in the world, and was now gone from the world except in that photograph. He thought about all the bikes with good brakes riding through streets he would never see. He set down the pie. He picked up a wrench. He decided what he was going to do. And he went back to work. The morning Renee Caldwell appeared on the street outside the garage at 414 Delmer. It was 6:53. And the sky was the particular pale gray of very early October, not quite dark and not quite light, the kind of sky that is still deciding what kind of day it is going to be. She had flown in from Atlanta the previous evening. She had taken a taxi from the airport to a motel 4 blocks away, because she was not the kind of person who presumed, and arriving at a stranger's door at any hour felt like presuming, even when you had spent 11 years looking for the door. She had eaten a quiet dinner in the motel room. She had slept badly, the way you sleep when you are very close to a thing you have wanted for a long time, and your body does not know how to be calm about that. She was 42 years old. She had a folder in her bag. The folder was organized in the precise way of a person who has organized and reorganized the same documents enough times to know exactly where everything is. She had dark hair with gray at the temples, which she had stopped covering 3 years ago because she had decided she had earned it. She was wearing a jacket that was slightly too light for the October morning. She had not checked the weather for this city before she packed, because her mind had been on other things. She stood on the sidewalk across from the garage and looked at it. The sign, the concrete, the yellow light coming on inside. She had seen the photograph. Everybody had seen the photograph by now. But she had recognized something in it that most people had not, because most people were seeing it for the first time, and she was seeing it for the first time and the 32nd time simultaneously, because she had been carrying the original version of this image in her memory for over 2 decades. She had been 10 years old. She had lived at that time in a small rental house in a neighborhood in Georgia that was not so different from this one. There had been a man on her street who fixed things. He had fixed her bicycle. He had checked the brakes twice. She had noticed the twice even then, at 10, though she had not understood why. She had moved away the next year when her mother found better work in another city. She had never gone back. She had not known the man's name. But she had remembered the twice. She had remembered it especially at 24, when she had started a small volunteer program that taught bicycle maintenance to children in underfunded schools in Atlanta, using the money from a grant she had spent 8 months writing. The program had grown. It was now in 7 cities. It served 400 children a year. She had named it after a boy she had never met, whose name she had found on a dedication plaque at a community center in Georgia 3 years after she started the program, while she was researching the history of community bike initiatives in the South. The plaque said, "In memory of Marcus Gaines, 12 years old, ride safe." She had stood in front of that plaque for a long time. She had begun looking for Walter Gaines after that. It had taken 11 years, not because he was hiding, but because he was simply a man who did not appear in the places the internet searched. No social media, no news articles, nothing. Just a name in a community center that no one else had thought to connect to anything. And then Sophie Archer had posted a photograph. And there he was. Renee crossed the street. She walked to the garage door. She stopped at the frame, the way everyone stopped at the frame, because entering without invitation felt wrong. Walter was at the workbench. His back was to her. He was working on something she could not see yet. "Mr. Gaines," she said. He turned around. He looked at her with the straight, reading look he gave to everything he had not yet assessed. He took in her face, her jacket, her folder, her expression, which she was working to keep neutral but which contained, she knew, everything she had been carrying for 11 years. "I'm not a reporter," she said immediately. "I can see that," he said. "My name is Renee Caldwell. I flew here from Atlanta last night." She paused. "I think you fixed my bicycle when I was 10 years old. I lived on Arden Street in Macon. You were there for 1 year, maybe 2. I don't think you remember me. I wouldn't expect you to." Walter was very still. "You fixed my bicycle," she said, "and you checked the brakes twice before you gave it back. I never forgot that." She stopped again. Her voice was steady. She had practiced this. "I never knew your name. I've been looking for you for 11 years. The garage was quiet. The pale October light came through the door and lay flat across the concrete. Walter said, "Come inside." She came inside. He gestured at the stool. She sat. He leaned against the workbench and folded his arms, not in a closed way, just in the way of a man settling himself for something. "Macon," he said, 62 Arden." She felt something move through her chest. "You remember it." "I remember most of the streets, the houses." He looked at her carefully. "You had a green bicycle with a basket. The basket was bent." Her eyes stung. She had not expected him to remember. She had told herself many times not to expect it. "Yes." "Your mother worked nights." You wrote it to a summer program in the mornings. Yes, her voice had gone quieter. I fixed the basket too, and the brakes. I know, I remember. She opened the folder. Her hands were steady. She had worked hard to be a steady person. I want to show you something. She laid the first document on the workbench. It was a program summary. The Marcus Bicycle Initiative, Atlanta, Georgia, founded 12 years ago. Walter looked at it. He looked at the name. She watched his face. He went very still, the way she had been told by Nadia, whom she had spoken with the previous afternoon, that he went still when something mattered too much for movement. You named it after him, he said. I found his name on a plaque, 3 years after I started the program. I hadn't started it because of the name, I started it because of the brakes. She looked at her hands. Because of the twice. Because someone checked twice and that meant something to me, and I never forgot it, and when I was old enough to do something with that, I did. Walter said nothing. He was looking at the document. She turned to the next page. Numbers, cities, schools, 412 children in the most recent year. Photographs of kids in workshops, small hands holding wrenches, bicycles upside down on stands, adults in blue program shirts, children grinning in the specific unguarded way of people who have just made something work. Walter looked at each page. She set down the last one. It was a photograph from the Atlanta workshop, a row of fixed bicycles. A little girl, maybe 11, holding a wrench and grinning straight at the camera. Walter put one large, dark hand flat on the photograph. He pressed it flat. He looked at it for a long time. 7 cities, he said. 7, we're applying to expand to 2 more next year. 400 children. 412 last year. The year before 380, it grows. He was quiet. His hand was still on the photograph. His jaw was tight in the way of a person holding something carefully inside. He was 12, Renee said. She said it gently, not to cause pain, because it was the truth that was in the room, and naming it honestly was a way of honoring it. And this started because you fixed brakes, because you checked them twice. That's the whole beginning of it. Walter's hand pressed slightly harder on the photograph. Then it relaxed. He pushed himself off the workbench. He walked to the small 2-burner stove at the back of the garage, the one he used for coffee in the mornings. Do you want coffee? He said. Yes, she said, please. He made 2 cups. He did it in silence, in the deliberate, unhurried way he did everything. She waited. She did not fill the silence. She had learned in the past 24 hours of preparation that this was the right thing to do. He set a cup in front of her. He took his own and stood by the workbench. You built something, he said. You gave me something to build from. I didn't know that. You didn't need to know. It happened anyway. He looked at her with the reading look again. She held it. Why did you come? He said, not unkindly, genuinely. He wanted to understand the purpose. Because you deserve to know, she said. Because someone should have told you a long time ago that what you did mattered and kept mattering and is still mattering right now, this morning, in Atlanta and Chicago and Charlotte and 4 other cities. She put both hands around her cup. And because the Marcus Initiative is growing and I want to bring it here, to this neighborhood, and I'd like your help. He said nothing. I don't mean your time or your money or your garage. I mean your name, your permission, your blessing, if you want to call it that. She looked at him steadily. The children here already know you. I talked to 3 of them yesterday. They know what this place is. Walter said, Nadia. And Owen and Priya, yes. He made the sound, not quite a laugh, the same family of thing. She talked about you for an hour, Renee said. She has a notebook. He looked at the ceiling for a moment, a slow blink. Of course she does. She's going to be remarkable. She already is, he said it simply, fact, not sentiment. He drank his coffee. Renee drank hers. Outside, the street was waking up. cars, a dog, someone's radio. I'm not interested in attention, Walter said. Any attention that comes with this. I know. I don't want your attention. I want your understanding that the work you've done has already traveled further than this street. And I want you to know that the boy in your toolbox is known. His name means something to hundreds of people who never met him. Walter went very still again. She waited. Does that help? She said, same words Nadia had used, not knowing. He looked at his hands, the same hands he had always looked at when the answer was not in words. Yes, he said, quietly, the quietest word she had heard from him. And then he said, tell me about the program. She told him. She talked for an hour. He listened in the complete way he listened, which was entirely with no part of his attention elsewhere. He asked questions that were precise and practical. What age groups? What tools? What was the ratio of instructors to students? What was the biggest problem in the first year? What did the children find hardest? She answered all of them. At some point, without either of them planning it, he walked to a bicycle in the corner and began working on it while she talked, and she simply continued talking. And this felt natural because it was natural, because this was how Walter Gaines received important things, in motion, with his hands engaged. Nadia arrived at noon. She stopped in the doorway and saw Renee and looked at Walter. She came, Nadia said. She came, Walter said. Nadia came inside and sat in her spot on the stool and looked at Renee with the 11-year-old directness of someone who has already done her research. You found him, she said. I did, said Renee. Are you going to fix things? Nadia said. Renee looked at Walter. He was working on the bicycle. He did not look up, but the corner of his mouth did something. We're going to try, Renee said. Nadia opened her notebook. Outside, the October light had made up its mind. It was going to be a clear day. The kind of day where everything looks the same as it always does but feels different, because something has shifted in it that you cannot quite put a name to yet. Inside the garage, a man who had spent 16 years in private doing was still in private doing. But for the first time in a long time, what he was doing was not only his. It had traveled. It had arrived. It had come back to him with interest. He checked the brakes. Twice. He handed the bicycle to Nadia. Good to go, he said. 3 months after Renee Caldwell flew home to Atlanta, the garage at 414 Delmer Street had a new sign. Same wood, same hand-painted letters. Walter had painted it himself on a Sunday morning when the children were not there, in the specific quiet he still needed sometimes, the quiet that was not loneliness anymore but had the shape of something close to peace. The sign said, Delmer Bike Works, free of charge, bring it back when you're done with it. The same promise, just with a name now. Nadia had suggested the name. Owen had argued for something more descriptive. Priya had said the simpler the better, which ended the argument, because she was almost always right and they had all accepted this. The Marcus Initiative came to the neighborhood in January. It was a small launch. 8 children, a donated workbench, tools from 3 separate collections that Renee had organized with the help of a local church. Walter was not the instructor. He had made clear in the direct and final way he made clear things he had decided, that he would not stand at a whiteboard and teach a curriculum. He would work. Anyone who wanted to watch could watch. Anyone who wanted to help could help. That was the curriculum. It turned out this was an extremely effective curriculum. The 8 children became 14 by February. 14 became 22 by March. By April, there was a waiting list, which Nadia managed with a small notebook and a seriousness that made adults twice her age slightly nervous about getting on her bad side. Owen was officially indispensable. He had organized the parts storage system so comprehensively that Walter had told him, on a Tuesday morning without ceremony, that he had done it better than Walter would have. Owen had received this compliment by immediately beginning to optimize the tool wall, and Walter had let him, because the wall had needed it. Priya had started writing about the garage, not for the internet, for herself in the precise and measured way she did everything. Long paragraphs about what she observed, about how Walter moved, about what the children asked and how he answered. She showed Nadia some of it. Nadia told her she should keep writing. Priya said she intended to. Carol brought pie every Saturday. Now she sometimes brought a friend, or a neighbor, or the woman from the blue house on the corner who had finally, after 7 months, worked up the nerve to bring in her ancient Dutch bicycle with the seized rear hub. Walter seized hubs in 40 minutes. The woman had wept, just briefly, and Carol had patted her arm and Walter had pretended not to see it because that was the kind thing to do. Grace came back with her braced bicycle, 6 months as Walter had said. He checked the brace. Held. He told her it would need full replacement in another year. He told her to start thinking about what she wanted. He had his eye on a frame at the salvage depot 2 miles over. She asked him how much. He said he would handle it. She started to argue. He picked up a wrench. She said thank you and left. Renee called every Sunday, 3 rings, then Walter answered. They had developed over 12 Sundays a phone call format that suited both of them. She gave him numbers from the other cities. He told her one thing about the week, usually one thing, sometimes 2. She had started writing them down because she had learned, the way Nadia had learned, that what he said in small deliveries was the thing most worth keeping. He had told her on the 4th Sunday that the thing he had not expected was the noise. Not noise as a complaint, just as an observation. The garage had been silent for so long that he had forgotten what it sounded like full. He was relearning what that was like. She had asked if he minded. He had been quiet for a moment. Then he had said, "It sounds like something it didn't always." She had written that down. On a Saturday in April, a journalist came, not with a van or a camera crew, just a woman named Claire, medium height, careful eyes, a recorder she kept in her bag until she had permission, which she asked for directly and without tricks. She had been a journalist for 18 years, and she had learned that the only way to get the real story was to make it easy for the person to say no to the fake one. She said, "I don't want to write about a feel-good moment. I want to write about what you actually built and why and what it took." Walter looked at her for a long time. Nadia, who was on the stool with her notebook, and was technically doing homework but was doing it at 12% efficiency, looked at Walter. He said, "You can stay, you can watch. When you have a question, ask it once. If I answer it, that's the answer. If I don't, move on." She agreed. She stayed for 3 Saturdays. The piece she wrote was not a feel-good piece. It was a piece about grief as labor, about what people make of loss when they have no other container for it, about a 4-block radius of children who could now check their own brakes, about a program in 7 cities built from a single check-twice moment that a man named Walter Gaines had made without knowing it would mean anything to anyone but himself. She quoted Walter 4 times. She quoted Nadia twice. She quoted Owen once because Owen had said, when she asked him what he thought of Walter, "I think he's someone who was doing the right thing before anyone was watching. And I think that's different from doing the right thing because someone might be watching, and I think it's the better kind." She had looked at him. He was 9, he shrugged. "I mean, that's just what I think." The piece ran in May. It was not a viral article. It did not get 17,000 shares. It was read slowly by people who read carefully, and those people recommended it to other people who also read carefully, and it made its way into a conversation at a foundation in Boston that was looking for community programs to fund. Renee had 3 meetings with that foundation in June. Walter did not attend any meetings. He worked. He was at the workbench on a Tuesday morning in early summer when Nadia came in and set her notebook on the stool and said, "The foundation said yes." He turned. Renee called me, Nadia said. She asked me to tell you. She knew you wouldn't pick up a number you didn't recognize. What did they say yes to? Funding for 3 more cities and a permanent space for the program here. She looked at him. A real space, not just the garage. He looked around the garage. I know, Nadia said. I told her you make that face. What face? The face where you look at the garage like it's fine, exactly as it is, and you don't understand why people feel the need to expand things. He almost smiled. Am I that readable? To me, yes. He turned back to the workbench. He was quiet for a moment. Tell Renee it's her program. She runs it how she sees fit. She wants to know if you'll consult. She knows where I am. She'll take that as a yes. He made no comment on this. Nadia sat on the stool. She opened her notebook. She had been keeping it for almost a year now. It had grown thick. She turned to a page near the beginning and looked at 2 words she had written there, my father. She turned to the next entry, checked them twice. She turned forward page by page, reading quickly through the year, the mornings, the pieces. Owen's tool records, Priya's questions, Carol's pie, Grace's frame, Renee's arrival in October light, 412 children in 7 cities. A boy on a blue bike. She turned to the last used page and wrote the date. Then she wrote, he said it sounds like something now. It didn't always. I think that's the point of all of it. She looked at it for a moment. Then she added, the breaks were always the point. She capped her pen. Walter was working. The wrench turned. The chain held. Outside, 3 children were coming up the street, backpacks bouncing, already arguing about something. Owen's voice was distinct even from inside the garage. Priya's was measured and precise. There was a third voice, younger, a child Nadia did not recognize yet, someone new. There were always new ones. Walter heard them coming. He did not look up. But something about the way he was standing shifted slightly. An opening, the small adjustment of a person who hears something they are glad to hear. The children came through the door, and the garage filled with their sound and their energy and their questions. And Walter answered what needed answering and handed Owen the right tool before he had finished asking for it. And Priya went immediately to the manual she kept on the shelf now, her name written inside the cover in case it wandered. The new child stood in the doorway, 8 years old maybe, a bicycle with a bent rim, the specific face of someone who has been told to try here, who is not sure what here is yet. Walter looked at her. Come in, he said. She came in. He took the bike, looked at the rim, made the thinking sound. This will take about 15 minutes, he said. You can wait. She nodded. He went to work. He did not tell her his name. He did not tell her about Marcus, or about Renee, or about 7 cities and 400 children, and a foundation in Boston. He did not tell her about 16 years of private doing, or about the photograph in the red box, or about what it sounds like when a garage goes from silence to something. He fixed the rim. He checked the brakes. Twice. He handed the bicycle back. Good to go, he said. She took it, started for the door, stopped. She turned back. Thank you, she said, very serious. The way small children are serious when they mean it completely. Walter said, bring it back if it needs anything. She said she would. She rode away with good brakes on a fixed bicycle, and she did not know yet what that meant, and she did not need to know yet, because it would simply be true for her for the rest of her life, the way true things are, without requiring a name or an explanation or a story. She would figure the story out later. She had time. Inside the garage, the work continued. The wrench turned. The children talked. The light was good that morning, coming through the door at an angle that made everything look exactly like what it was, clear and whole and real. Walter Gaines picked up the next bike. He looked at it the way he looked at everything that needed something. Directly, without rushing, looking for where the trouble started, looking for what needed doing. Then he got to work.